How's it going, guys? I have a story to tell you, and the reason why I would like to tell you the story is to show you that when we fail to see humanity in other people that are different than us, different in color, different in gender, different in physical attribute, different for whatever reason that we find them to be different than us. When we fail to do that, we become cruel, and our actions are so blinded by a desire to want to be better than someone else that will cause tremendous harm to others. This is the story of Ota Benga. Ota Benga was a pygmy. A pygmy is a native of the rainforest in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they grow to be very small in stature. Ota Benga was about 4 foot 11, so a very small man. And he was born in 1983. And the theory of Darwin, which was that man originated from monkeys, was very prominent in society, in communities, and in civilizations. And scientists were deeply researching to find that missing link between the monkeys and the humans. Because there is a gap that has never been found by science, the missing link that science couldn't pinpoint and couldn't wrap their fingers around. And so that was the big mystery of that age, and everybody was searching for it. Everybody was looking for this hidden link in the genome. Um, that link was the big quest that all scientists were after, especially in the Western world and in Europe. And this is where the story of Ota Benga becomes interesting. Because there was a missionary by the name of Samuel Phillips Werner, who traveled to the Congo, and particularly in this region of the Congo, in the rainforest, where he encountered the people known as the Pygmies. And and it is tradition for these people to sharpen their teeth so that it looks almost like fangs. And in seeing that, he realized that this is the missing link. This is the missing link that scientists have been looking for. This was not necessarily a scientific finding. This was more a desire driven by greed and by money. Of course, he knew that if he was able to come back to the New World, America or Europe, and present this as evidence for the missing link, it could definitely capitalize on this finding. So while he was there, he decided to bring a group of them to America. And and they came to New York. And while they were in New York, they were placed in a zoo. And there was this idea and all these drawings that were designed to illustrate the development of the human. And between the human and the monkeys were these African shapes. And this obsession in creating these missing links seemed to fit perfectly with the genome of Africans and the way we looked and the way our bones were structured and the way our lips and our facial features were structured, that it only made sense to scientists of that time to say that these are the missing links between the monkeys and us, the humans, which were white. So upon his second trip back to the African rainforest, he encountered Ota Benga. And and during that encounter, he convinced Ota Benga's family that he was going to take him to America and get him an education, and he would come back with a lot of wealth and a lot of things that would allow the community and the village to to better themselves and become more like him, like the Western world. And they agreed, trusted him, and allowed them to take their son. And he brought Ota Benga to New York, where there was a zoo, and he was placed in a cage with monkeys, as to illustrate that this is the missing link that has been found. Articles spread across the city and even across states saying that the missing link between the monkeys and the human has been found and is being held in this zoo, and you should all come and see it. And they would charge $1 for each person that went, housing about 40,000 people a day. And it has been recorded that up to 48 million people went to the zoo. And he was being exposed in this environment with monkeys, and of course scientists of that time who were very obsessed with this idea and this image of proving the superiority of the white race, most of them who were inspired by writings and teachings that comes from Germany, from the leader of Germany during that time, known as Adolf Hitler, and justify this idea that Ota Benga was the missing link, the half man, half monkey. And people were fascinated, and it was all over the city, all over the newspapers, the radios. And people flocked over to see this. And this went on for a few years. And there was an incident where he was even released into the city like a monkey would, and people would chase after him. A whole crowd would try to catch him. And as I'm telling this story, I want you to picture yourself, or picture your son, or your brother, or your sister in this man's shoes. Imagine that these things were happening to you, to your son, to your daughter, and that they were placed in a cage with monkeys. And that every single person that showed up with this fascination at seeing what something less than human looks like. He didn't have a voice, and he didn't know what was going on. And with that, it took a few brave activists who stood up and pointed out this injustice and demanded to the zoo as to why they were keeping a human being in a cage. And the defense was that it was simply there to look after the monkeys. But this injustice was not allowed to continue any longer, and they asked him to be released. And when he was, by that point, the United States was already involved in World War II, and there were no ships going back to Africa. And he was forced to remain in the United States, where he was sent to an orphanage and eventually enrolled into school. Now, Ota Benga, being someone that grew up in Africa, free, he could do anything that he wanted to do, whether he was running into a river to swim or, playing with his friends in the open, completely free. Was not bound into an environment where he had no family, he had no parent, he didn't understand the language, and he was not accepted and discriminated against. I could imagine how alone he must have felt. And of course, he couldn't adjust himself to the pace of school in America, because that's not how he grew up. And I could imagine how traumatic this experience was for him, to the point where he eventually killed himself in 1916. And as sad as this story is, I am telling it to you to bring awareness. I'm telling it to you to bring awareness to the value of life, the value of human life. Can you imagine how many people went home that day with this imprint in their mind that someone that looks like this, that has this skin color, is the missing link between monkeys and human beings? Can you imagine how many people raise their kids believing that? Can you imagine how that might have made its way through generation after generation after generation until today? This happened in this country 100 years ago. Ota Benga was a human being. He might have been different from what the Western world is familiar to. His culture might have been different. The way they dressed might have been different. The way the customs that they held might have been different. But it didn't make him any less human. I want to bring your awareness to this because this is the most fundamental issue that we see when people are too obsessed with this idea of wanting to be better than. It's the society that we live in. And when we're so obsessed at becoming better than other people, the only thing that we want to do with everybody else is belittle and find reasons to bring down the value of those around us so we can feel better about ourselves. And that can make us cruel. It is very cruel to take someone from his home, to strip his freedom and put him in a cage, to lessen his value to the value of an animal, to capitalize off of that. A human being with feelings and emotions. He cares just as much as you do. He feels love and he deserves the same comfort that you have. But this was taken away from him under the pretense of religion. He was seduced by a missionary, a man intended to spread the word of God. He is the man who brought a young boy to be placed in a cage. And now you ask me, why do I find such a big problem with Christianity and with religions that are so obsessed with power and control and not giving the members a voice, that are so obsessed with order and respect? When you don't value human life, yet you want people to give you all authority upon their lives, there is something that is off. Like we have to look beyond it. And I see it today. Like I was on Instagram today and I saw a young lady in America creating a live talking to African kids and mocking their ignorance, eventually making a mockery of their ignorance. And that breaks my heart, being a kid that was born in Africa, being in a position where I had that ignorance, and I understand how they must feel to, at the end of that video conference or whatever, realize that they were just some pawn into someone else's scheme to gain whatever validation, wealth, and money that they want to get. And that's on a smaller scale, but we are human. We are human beings. Like, this is just a concentration of melanin. Like, if you cut me open and I cut you open, we'll bleed the same. It is not okay for human beings to have to cry out to be seen as human beings. And this is what happens when we as a people become obsessed with becoming better than, holier than, becoming more special than. Like, we are entering a new age. And it's time to start realizing what is wrong with this world. And just because you may not be seeing it every single day doesn't mean that these things have not happened. And I'm speaking to the people who have been in a position that had the luxury to sit home and hear this on news and go to the zoo and pay $1. I'm speaking to the people that had the luxury to go and pay $1 at a zoo to go and take a look at a human being. You have been misled, you have been lied to, you have been manipulated because of somebody's greed. This man was just greedy and he wanted to use a human life as a way to make money. He didn't even think about the consequences, the atrocious consequences of making 48 million people think that someone that looks like this is an animal. And if you don't see that there's something wrong with that, then you're just as blind as he was. This is not the world that I choose to live in. This is not the world. This is not how the world is meant to be. The world is not meant to be this way. And some of the issues we see today is a result of that. And we cannot allow it to keep going. We can no longer remain asleep. Because the truth is that if you, and I understand you love your parents and the traditions that they taught you, but your parents were the same people that went to a zoo and paid to see a man belittled to the level of an animal. And those are the traditions that they pass down to you. So if you don't question them, you are just as implicated as they are. So it's time for you to start questioning before you call people savages. You have to question, are they really savages? And why would someone intentionally treat a human being that way? Black people are human beings. Asian people are human beings. People from Australia, the Aborigines, are human beings. Immigrants are human beings. Just remember that it's about human lives. It's not just about laws and legislatures. It's about human life. If you start protecting human life, you can't go wrong. Because what good are all these laws if you're destroying human lives? You're killing people. You're destroying people's hope and people's value. And that's terrible. And I'm making this video to bring awareness to you because as much as this sickens me and angers me, I still believe that there is hope. I still believe that people are good and there is good in you. If you're watching this video, you have good in you and you have to transcend your prejudice. You have to transcend your ignorance. You have to educate yourself. You have to go beyond what you know. You have to speak to people. Even if I look like this, stop in the street and talk to me. Get to know me and you'll find that my heart feels just as much as yours does. That we are both humans and we're connected. Please, please, start to feel again. Your hearts are cold. Start to feel again. Open your hearts up and start to feel. Start to love again, please. People need to be seen. And this can't go on. We can't continue to act like this is not happening, like these differences are not existent. We have to acknowledge the errors that have been made in the past and they were wrong and they must be pointed out so we can change them. Not because I just want to be a nagging black man, but because we're talking about human lives. And if you want to say that all lives matter, then prove it. Prove it. Treat my life like yours. Treat Ota Benga's life like yours. Stand up for him like it was one of your own ancestors that got oppressed. Recognize what was done to him. Recognize what is being done to people that are considered as less than. And put an end to it. Please. Open your hearts again and start to love. We are one people. And only when we learn to see ourselves as one will all of this come to an end. Love and peace.